So today we're going to talk about Inter Miami in the moving forward series, and besides RSL this season, Inter Miami probably had the most chaotic off the field situation that any team has had this season, and we'll definitely get to talk about the ongoing off the field situation that they had to deal with. But unfortunately, unlike RSL, where they were able to overcome that off the field distraction, Inter Miami couldn't do so, and it was kind of a team that I think in the beginning of the season I don't think a lot of people would be surprised that this team would underachieve. Like, I even said that when I look at this team, yes, they do have some talent on their team, but it's kind of like a very disjointed kind of squad, and it's also a squad that's kind of very hollow and doesn't have a lot of depth whatsoever. And while they didn't really have a lot of guys that was injured throughout the season, a lot of those key pieces that they built as the main core of this team really underachieved this season. They finished this season with a 12-5-17 record and finished with 41 points. They scored 36 goals, which is tied with the worst goal scorer mark alongside the Chicago Fire. And they gave up 53 goals with a goal differential of -17. And they finished 11 in not the Western Conference. It's actually the Eastern Conference that they had. Don't worry, Miami did not move to the Western Conference like Nashville has. Oh, this pen doesn't seem like it is working well, so let me just get this purple one here. Yeah, so they finished 11 in the East, which, this purple one didn't even work too, so I guess I'll get this one here. Hopefully this one will work. Yep, there we go. Yeah, they finished 11 in the Eastern Conference, which was even worse than they finished in their first ever season, finishing 10th place and making the playoffs. Top goal scorer for this team, Gonzalo Higuain, scored 12 goals this season, and it was really a quiet kind of 12 goals that he scored this year. I don't think a lot of people have kind of given the credit the fact that, Higuain definitely had a bounce back season. Now, obviously, is he still worth the $7 million that Inter Miami paid him back in the first year? Maybe. I mean, he did finish as the top goal scorer and the top assist leader, but when you're basically earn the most, you are expected to always do that. And in some way, you could also argue that maybe Higuain could have done much more, considered he also had many games where he had a lot of chances to score goals, and if he could have even put away some of those chances, he could have scored more than the 12 goals, or even maybe win the Golden Boot this year. But nevertheless, there's no doubt that this year was a major bounce back year, even though it was relatively quiet in that. Not a lot of people talk about how Higuain actually finished with double-digit goal scored this season. But after that, they don't really have anybody that scored more than 5 goals. The closest is Robbie Robinson with 4 goals, followed by Federico Higuain with 3 goals. Then you got Rodolfo Pizarro and Indiana Vassilev finishing the top 5 with also 3 goals apiece. Top assist leader, also Gonzalo Higuain with 9 assists, followed by Rodolfo Pizarro with 7 assists. Then you got Gregory with 4 assists, Leandro Gonzalo Perez with 4 assists, and Federico Higuain finished up with 4 assists for Inter Miami. So what went right for this team? And I'm not going to lie, this was probably the toughest team I have to come up with what went right in the moving forward series, and maybe potentially the toughest team I will have to kind of come up with what went right, because let's be honest, nothing went right with this team. Like, this team, it was just an absolute disaster of a year where, besides that small hope, the fact that they went on that unbeaten run and get themselves closer to making the playoffs, and then of course got on another 6-game losing streak to pretty much completely end that hope. There was really nothing that went right for this team. So I really had to be nitpicking in terms of what actually went right. And the only 2 things I can come up with is, one, at least they have a full capacity crowd at Drive Pink Stadium for the very first time. And at least Inter Miami fans that's been waiting to see this team for the very first time, they finally got a chance to do so in that game against the LA Galaxy. And that was probably the only time this season where it was a packed house at that stadium. Like, I actually went to one of their game, and I know it was a Wednesday game, and they were playing against Toronto FC, who was also out of the playoff contention. But there was nobody that was actually watching this game, and you can definitely see that the hype level of this team have definitely started to dwindle, and it's not a big surprise because if you are a new team, unless you have a really strong fan base, which Miami does have that, but if you start off with such a disastrous kind of round with the whole off the field and on the field situation that they've been in, it's not a big surprise why fans don't want to pay tickets to go to these games. And not to mention, when I look at some of the tickets to go to these games, it's not cheap whatsoever. Like, the tickets are relatively expensive, and also not to mention the fact that that stadium is in Fort Lauderdale and not in Miami. That's kind of just a recipe of the way that it just feels like this team, it's unsurprising that there wasn't a lot of people that is worthy to try to make the drive up to Fort Lauderdale to watch a team that is clearly losing. But at least for that one game against the Galaxy, at least that was really a game where that we can finally see a potential of how this fan base can be a decent one if they have a winning culture, and also maybe play against a relatively well-known team like the LA Galaxy. But yeah, that's at least one thing that kind of went right for this team, even though technically that's kind of something that would went right for every team, where they finally get a full capacity crowd for the first time after this whole pandemic that was happening. Second thing that went right for this game, again, I talked about Gonzalo Higuain quietly had a much improved season after a disastrous first season in MLS where he only scored one goal. And I think this is just kind of once again a case where Higuain, he's coming to a new league, and I know he basically talked about how he thought that he's going to come to MLS, and he's just going to just simply show up and he just basically dominate the game. Now, I think if this was maybe 10 years ago, then I think Higuain does have a case, because we've seen before 10 years ago when MLS was still like at that 1.0 stage, you see all these European superstar player that may be aging badly, but when they come to the league, that they're going to be the best player in this league, because they have the quality of that compared to the rest of the league that maybe hasn't got that quality of the ones that they of course have. But unfortunately nowadays it is MLS 3.0, and we know that nowadays the quality, especially on the playing field, and the players are so much better than what we saw 10 years ago. And it's no wonder why a lot of these aging players from Europe, they might be surprised that nowadays MLS is more competitive than ever, and you just simply cannot just show up and expect the fact that it's going to be easy. It could be a really tough grinding period, and at least I think for Higuain, he kind of realized that of course is the case, and eventually kind of decided to not have that kind of thought process that everything was going to be easy, and it started to kind of work harder as the season go along. I mean, earlier this season you can definitely see he was still kind of lazy, but in some way he did work much harder as the season goes on. And again, no surprise that this season he finishes the top goal scorer and assist leader for this team. So what went wrong for this team? Oh boy, a lot of things went wrong for Inter Miami. First thing that went wrong is the inconsistency. It happened again for this team, but this was kind of also something that I said with the Chicago Fire, where they were also a team that was inconsistent, but there was time where they were just inconsistently bad. And this is the same case with Inter Miami, where they found themselves in two different 6-game losing streak, and when you basically have two 6-game losing streak in a season, you're not going to make the playoffs. And it's unsurprising that of course it is the case. And I think that second 6-game losing streak has to be a backbreaker too, because they were riding off with such a good momentum, and they looked like they were going to get themselves above the red line before when they had that unbeaten run comes to an end. Little do we know that was the beginning of another 6-game losing streak that they were in. There was no real goal scorer besides Gonzalo Higuain on this team. I mean, Robbie Robinson, he did try to do so. He did had a really good form when he came back from injury, but then his form kind of started to dwindle a little bit, and then it just kind of goes back to where this team just don't have any true goal scorer besides Gonzalo Higuain up front in the number 9 position. And then last thing that went wrong for this team, oh boy, I mean, are you ready to talk about some of the off-field situation that Inter Miami has? Because it all started last year when we talked about how, Inter Milan, they were not happy with how Inter Miami decided to kind of take that Inter name, and that it seems like there was some trademark issue, and that they even went to court about this to see to basically complain to the fact that they had some trademark licensing problem with that. Now, I think eventually that settlement has been settled, or maybe I might be wrong because I haven't heard a lot about that settlement ever since there was talks about that being happening last season. But I'm assuming it's already been settled, and Inter Miami was able to keep the Inter name, even though, as I mentioned, there was that lawsuit that they had with Inter Milan. And then, of course, it was found out now later of them making an illegal signing on Blaise Matudi and basically making him a TAM player when in reality he was actually a designated player. And I remember I said the fact that, as great as the signing is for Inter Miami getting Blaise Matuidi as a TAM player, I just had a feeling it was too good to be true. Like, this was a guy that literally was, before he come to Inter Miami, he was with Juventus and was still at the top of his game, even though his career was started even though his age has kind of started to show up a little bit, but he's still a World Cup winner. And the fact that, they were able to sign only on a TAM contract, that was just too good to be true. And in the end, it was too good to be true with the way that the amount that Inter Miami paid for Blaise Matuidi actually surely qualify him as a DP player. So, yeah, they, of course, were fined a lot of game because of that. Some of the front office people had to be resigned because of the situation, and not to mention the fact that in the end, Blaise Matuidi, as much as when he was signed with this team last September, and how I said it was a great signing, yeah, it didn't turn out that way. I mean, he was a huge flop, one of the biggest flop we've seen this last 2 years, with the way that he just did not do anything and just completely regressed and almost fell off the cliff as soon as he joined this team and played for this Inter Miami team. And then the last off-field issue that they, of course, been having is the stadium situation. I mean, there's been just almost like a stalemate right now with the stadium situation, with the way that there's been talks of the city not approving that plan, and there's also talks of more suing and more lawsuit that is going. I mean, if you call Inter Miami lawsuit, I wouldn't blame you for saying that, because this team, it just feels like there's always some turmoil that this team has to go through, and there's so much lawsuit that also goes through. And I know Inter Miami fans probably are pretty pissed off about that and kind of feel like, can they just leave us alone for once? I mean, we have enough to deal with. We do not have to deal with any more kind of lawsuit situation that this team has had. But moving forward for this Inter Miami team, well, the first thing moving forward for them is how much more time will Phil Neville get with this team. I mean, I am beyond shocked the fact that Phil Neville is still with Inter Miami. Like I said last season, he was the first coach to be fired. And the fact that, he wasn't the first coach being fired, that was maybe a little bit surprised. But the fact that literally we had, 7 firing last season and 17 fired their head coach, and not one of those teams was Inter Miami decided to fire Phil Neville. And even with those losing streak that they were on, I thought for sure that they were going to fire him. Like that one game I think they were definitely going to fire him is when they lost 5-1 against Nashville SC at home, and that was just an utter embarrassment at home in front of their home fans. And when you lose like that, you usually get the axe, and the fact that he did not get the axe is beyond surprising. And it's also kind of getting to the point where, well, if he's not going to get fired because of that 5-1 humiliation against Nashville at home, I just had a feeling he was never going to be fired, and that turns out to be the case, as he is still here. And I will say that as bad as Phil Neville is this season, I will give him maybe a little bit of a silver lining of the fact that he wasn't actually the worst, because I think this season we have definitely seen worse head coach than what Phil Neville has had. But let's also not sugarcoat it anymore, the fact that he's not a good head coach whatsoever, and we knew that from day one. And we'll see whether or not next season he's going to be under the hot seat again. I mean, he has to be under the hot seat again. I think the only reason I can say that maybe Phil Neville is still with Inter Miami is, one, he has that relationship with David Beckham, and when you have a good relationship with the owner, you're most likely going to get more time, even if you don't do well with a team. And then also the other reason might be because of him coming into a new team for the first year, and maybe Inter Miami is a little bit more patient compared to other team in terms of giving their head coach a year or two to kind of get their feet into MLS and hope to kind of turn things around. But we'll see. Heading into this next season, I mean, I will be beyond shocked again if he's going to be still there next season if this team does not make it to the playoffs. And then moving to the next point of the moving forward for Inter Miami is, they're already making some signings in the offseason. I know they recently signed Ariel Laster from the Houston Dynamo, which is an okay signing. I mean, I guess that does give them more depth in terms of the number 9 position, though I didn't think Lassiter really did well with the Houston Dynamo. I mean, he's a guy that is a very speedy player, but he's also a guy that cannot finish. So basically, pace is the only thing that is in his game, and I won't be surprised. Maybe they'll push him more into the winger position. But the other thing that I also will say moving forward for this team, and how, as much as I know some fans will say, well, why don't they just blow it up? Like, it seems like this team is clearly not working. Well, here's the problem. They can't blow it up. Like, you look at the contract that these players are locked up in this, and the main core that they build up, most of those players are under contract next season. So the only way you can basically blow it up is to kind of cut your losses, and it just feels like that's not how that's not something that Inter Miami want to do. And I don't blame them, because if you decide to do that, then you're maybe not going to left with a lot of money to, of course, sign players to replace them, and not to mention they're also are still trying to recover in terms of the finance point after they were fined millions of dollars of GAM by making that illegal signing of Blaise Matudi back in September. So it's almost like they're in a cap house right now. Like, they want to get rid of this corp, but they just simply can't, because they just don't have the finance to do so. And then the last thing moving forward for this team is, what's the future of the new stadium at the Freedom Park site? I mean, I mentioned before, there's just been so many lawsuits that's been going on with that, and that I know they have recently just show a rendering of how the stadium is gonna look a couple of months ago. But let's be honest, you can show all the render, or but as long as if there's not an agreement between the city of Miami and them giving the green light of them building that stadium, it's a very bleak kind of future with how Inter Miami is going to be playing at that site. I mean, don't get me wrong, as much as I know their stadium issue, or their new stadium issue that they've been having, it could have been worse than what other team is. I mean, that team called New York City FC that is playing at Yankee Stadium, and how they were, of course, promised to build themselves a new stadium after they came into the league, and then now we are in 2021 and they're still playing at Yankee Stadium. And believe me, if I have to choose between watching a game in person or on TV, between watching Inter Miami play at Drive Pink Stadium compared to NYCFC playing at Yankee Stadium, I would choose watching Inter Miami playing at Drive Pink Stadium 100 times over, because at least that stadium that they build, even though it's a temperate stadium, it's a really nice temperate stadium. I mean, as I said, I've been there before. It's kind of amazed me, the fact that they literally built that stadium in 11 months. And yes, it is kind of also a little bit bare bone, but what did you expect when you built a stadium in less than a year? And it's still, the sightline was absolutely amazing, even for a temporary stadium. And I don't think it's too bad. It's too bad for them to even stay there longer. They need to do, even with the issue with the new stadium that they want to build. But there's no doubt that they want to build that stadium as soon as possible, because again, if you're going to attract some fans to go to watch this team play, you need to, of course, have a stadium that is near the Miami area, and not have to force your fans to drive like 30-mile north in order to watch this team play in the future. But let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video? And if you're an Inter Miami fan, let me know in the comments below what went right, what went wrong, and most importantly, moving forward, how is this team is going to look. I mean, I can already tell that this team, next season, as much as they're trying to maybe change things up and maybe make some signings, or maybe even make another big money signing. I mean, I've been hearing there's a rumor that they could potentially sign James Rodriguez into this team. And if he does sign with this team, I mean, I don't know if he's going to be decent, because James Rodriguez has really started to go through a downward spiral ever since he joined with Real Madrid. So if you sign another player that is already heading to a downward spiral and expect he to be a good player, then yeah, that maybe is not the way to, of course, build the team. But we shall see how they're going to maybe fix things up, and in some way they're kind of also restricted in terms of how to fix things up because of the numerous issues that they have to deal off the field and the finance, and not to mention they're stuck with just tons of dead weight contract in their team for next season. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.